The conference hall buzzed with tension. Bright lights reflected off polished surfaces, casting sharp shadows across rows of chairs filled with scientists, military leaders, and alien diplomats. At the center of it all stood Jae-hoon Park, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the display screen behind him. Jae-hoon was not a tall man. He was average height, with wire-rimmed glasses that always seemed slightly crooked on his nose. His dark hair was neatly combed, but a single strand always managed to fall across his forehead, a detail he was completely unaware of. Most people in the room didn't expect much from him. He was just another young engineer with another seemingly impossible project. The massive screen behind him showed a strange material. It looked like nothing special, a dull gray surface with an odd, slightly bumpy texture. To most people in the room, it appeared unremarkable. But Jae-hoon knew different. This was his life's work, a ceramic polymer composite armor that he believed could change everything. Seated to his left were the alien diplomats from the Craxian Confederacy. They were impossible to miss. Towering figures with skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver, with long, slender fingers that moved with an almost liquid grace. Their representative, Ambassador Krell, looked particularly amused. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jae-hoon began, his voice slightly higher than he intended. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Today, I'm presenting a new type of protective material that could revolutionize defensive technologies." A soft chuckle rippled through the audience. The Craxian diplomats didn't even try to hide their laughter. Ambassador Krell leaned forward, his multi-jointed body moving like a complicated machine. "Another human invention?" he asked, his translator rendering his words in a smooth, almost musical tone. "We have heard many such claims before." Jae-hoon took a deep breath. He had prepared for this. Years of research, countless failed prototypes, and sleepless nights had led to this moment. He knew his material was different. He just had to prove it. With a click, he brought up a series of technical diagrams. Complex molecular structures danced across the screen, showing intricate layers of ceramic and polymer bonded in ways no one had attempted before. "Our current armor technologies are limited," Jae-hoon explained. "They block some impacts but fail under extreme conditions. This new composite can absorb and redistribute energy in ways previously thought impossible." More laughter. The Craxian diplomats exchanged knowing glances. Their plasma weapons could cut through most known materials like a hot knife through butter. What could this small human possibly have created? "A demonstration," Jae-hoon said, his voice gaining strength. "I'd like to show you something." He nodded to a team member who wheeled in a small testing apparatus. A section of the armor was mounted on a steel frame, ready for impact testing. The room watched, most expecting another disappointing display of human limitation. Little did they know that this moment would change everything. The first test was about to begin. And with it, the first challenge to everything the Craxian Confederacy believed about human technology. The deep space research vessel, Horizon, hummed with quiet energy. Captain Hae-jin Kim stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Outside the large viewing window, stars stretched into infinite darkness. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing suggested the danger that was about to arrive. Commander David Rodriguez approached her, a digital tablet in his hand. "Captain," he said, "we're receiving strange readings from the outer sensor grid." Hae-jin's eyes narrowed. Strange was never good in deep space. "Show me," she commanded. The tablet displayed a series of complex graphs. Energy signatures were building up in a pattern that looked wrong. Very wrong. Something was approaching that didn't match any known ship design in their database. "Communications." Hae-jin called to her communications officer. "Status on our diplomatic mission." The young officer, Sarah Lee, checked her screens. "All green, Captain. We're still en route to the neutral trading station in Sector 7. But something felt off. Hae-jin could feel it in her bones. Years of space travel had given her an instinct that went beyond computer readings. Something was coming. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red warning lights began to pulse across the bridge. The peaceful quiet shattered in an instant. "Unidentified vessels approaching," shouted the radar technician. "Multiple contacts. They're not responding to communication attempts." David Rodriguez moved quickly. Shields up. Defensive positions. The first plasma bolt hit before they could fully prepare. The ship shuddered. Electronic systems flickered. For a moment, everything went dark. When the emergency lights came back on, Hai-Jin knew they were under attack. But not just any attack. These were Craxian weapons. Powerful. Destructive. Designed to tear through most known defensive technologies. "Damage report," she yelled. The ship's computer responded in a calm voice that felt completely wrong given the chaos. "Primary shields failing. Hull integrity compromised in sections 3 and 4. David looked at Hai-Jin with a desperate expression. They were losing. Quickly. And then Hai-Jin remembered something. Something from the conference weeks ago. Jae-hoon Park's experimental armor. "Rodriguez," she said quickly, "remember that weird armor prototype we saw at the research conference? The one everyone laughed at." He looked confused. "The ceramic polymer thing. What about it?" "We have some sample panels in the cargo hold," Hai-Jin said. "Emergency protocol Delta 9. Get those panels and start reinforcing our most critical sections. Now." It was a crazy plan, using an untested technology against the most advanced weapons in the known galaxy. But they had no other choice. As another plasma bolt struck the ship, David began barking orders to the engineering team. Jae-hoon's seemingly useless armor was about to get its first real test. The horizon shook again. Sparks flew from control panels. Crew members held onto their stations. Outside, Craxian ships continued their relentless assault. In that moment, everything would depend on a material that most experts had dismissed as a waste of time. A material created by a young engineer who refused to give up on his impossible dream. The real test was about to begin. The ship's hull groaned. Metal twisted and bent under impossible pressure. Plasma bolts bright as miniature suns slammed against the horizon's hastily reinforced sections. Each impact should have torn the vessel apart. Each blast should have meant certain death. But something strange was happening. David Rodriguez watched in disbelief. The armor panels, those strange gray sheets Jae-hoon had developed, were doing something impossible. Where plasma bolts struck, the material didn't just resist. It seemed to absorb the energy. "Captain," he called to Hai-Jin, "you need to see this." On the main viewing screen, Craxian ships continued their relentless attack. Their plasma weapons were legendary. Entire civilizations had fallen to these energy weapons. They could slice through battleships like a hot knife through butter. No known material could withstand their power. Except this one. The first direct hit came from the lead Craxian vessel. A massive plasma bolt, bright blue-white, struck the horizon's starboard side. The entire crew braced for destruction. Systems flickered. Gravity generators wobbled. But the ship held. Not just held, the armor actually seemed to drink in the plasma's energy. Where the bolt hit, the gray material momentarily glowed, then quickly cooled. Sensors showed something even more remarkable. The ship's power systems were actually gaining energy from the impact. "That's impossible," whispered Sarah Lee, the communications officer. Her hands flew across her control panel, checking and rechecking the readings. Hai-Jin moved closer to the main display. Her eyes narrowed, analyzing every detail. Years of space combat training told her this shouldn't be happening. Plasma weapons were the most destructive force known in their part of the galaxy. They didn't get absorbed. They didn't get converted. But Jae-hoon's armor was doing exactly that. Another plasma bolt struck. Then another. Each time, the result was the same. The armor panels glowed briefly, then returned to their dull gray color. The ship's power levels began to climb. On the external communication channel, something even more surprising happened. The Craxian ships stopped firing. "They're scanning us," David reported. "Multiple scan attempts from all their vessels." Hai-Jin could imagine the confusion on the alien ships. Their most powerful weapons were being turned into nothing more than energy input. It was like trying to destroy a wall by feeding it electricity. The lead Craxian vessel, easily 10 times the size of the Horizon, moved closer. Its massive weapons arrays tracked their every movement. But no more plasma bolts came. "They don't understand what's happening," Hai-Jin said quietly. And she was right. The aliens were encountering something completely outside their understanding of physics, a technology so different, so unexpected, that it broke their entire concept of warfare. Jae-hoon's impossible armor had just changed everything. The Horizon drifted in space, surrounded by stunned Craxian vessels. A small human research ship had just survived an attack that should have destroyed it in seconds, and it had done so with a material most experts had laughed at just weeks before. Sometimes, the most important discoveries look like mistakes at first. The emergency lab was chaos. Computers blinked. Machines hummed. Scientists moved quickly between workstations. At the center of it all stood Dr. Seong-Min Lee, her eyes fixed on a screen filled with impossible data. Jae-hoon Park watched nervously. His hands were sweaty. His heart raced. This was the moment of truth. "Explain it again," Dr. Lee said, turning to Jae-hoon. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed excitement. Jae-hoon took a deep breath. "The armor is not just a shield," he began. "It's like a living system. Most materials block energy. My material does something different. It takes the energy and changes it." On the large screen, molecular diagrams danced. Complex structures showed how ceramic and polymer layers worked together. Each layer was like a tiny energy converter. Plasma that should have destroyed the material was instead being broken down, transformed. "Look here," Jae-hoon pointed. A series of graphs showed energy input and output. When the plasma hits the armor, it doesn't just stop. It gets changed into usable power. Dr. Lee raised an eyebrow. "How usable?" Another screen lit up. It showed the Horizon's power systems during the attack. Where normal ships would have lost power, this ship had actually gained energy. The plasma weapons had become a power source. "It's like the armor is eating the energy," David Rodriguez said. He had joined them in the lab, still wearing his captain's uniform. "Turning weapons into food." Jae-hoon nodded. "Exactly. The molecular structure has special channels, tiny pathways that break down plasma energy and convert it into electrical power. It's not blocking. It's transforming." The scientists around them stopped working. They listened. This was more than just a new material. This was a completely new way of thinking about defense and energy. Dr. Lee began to explain to the others. "Imagine a shield that doesn't just protect. A shield that turns enemy weapons into your own power source. One plasma bolt could now power an entire ship section." The implications were huge. Space combat would change forever. Defensive technologies would be rewritten. And it all came from a material most experts had laughed at just weeks before. "We need to test more," Jae-hoon said. His voice was quiet but strong. "We need to understand every part of how this works." Computers continued to process data. The molecular diagrams continued to spin. Each image showed how something impossible had become possible. A small robot brought Jae-hoon a cup of coffee. He barely noticed. His mind was racing with possibilities. How far could this technology go? What else could it do? Outside the lab, the Horizon drifted in space. The Craxian ships that had attacked now followed at a distance. They were confused, scared. Their most powerful weapons had become useless. Dr. Lee looked at Jae-hoon. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked. Jae-hoon smiled, a small, nervous smile. "Not yet," he said, "but I'm going to find out." The real work was just beginning. The diplomatic station hung in space like a giant metal wheel. Lights blinked. Ships moved slowly around its outer ring. Inside, tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ambassador Yuna Park stood tall. Her dark blue uniform was crisp. Her hands were calm. Behind her, military commanders waited. They had a plan that would change everything. The Craxian delegates sat across the large round table. Their silver-blue skin seemed to shimmer under the station's lights. They looked nervous. Something had happened during the recent space battle that they didn't understand. "We demand an explanation," said Ambassador Krell, the lead Craxian diplomat. His translator made his voice sound smooth and cold. "How did your ship survive our plasma weapons?" Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that made people uncomfortable. "Technology advances," she said simply. Commander Rodriguez stepped forward. He carried a small case. Inside was a sample of the armor that had changed everything. The case was made of special glass that could protect against most scanning attempts. The room watched. Rodriguez placed the case on the table. Light caught the small piece of armor. It looked simple, boring even, just a gray piece of material that seemed unremarkable. "This," he said, "is why your weapons failed." The Craxian diplomats leaned forward. Their long fingers reached out but didn't touch the case. They knew something important was happening. Outside the diplomatic station, something else was happening. Human ships began to move, not in attack, not in defense, but in a way that showed complete confidence. The first demonstration was simple. A small human scout ship approached a Craxian battle cruiser. The battle cruiser was huge. It could destroy most ships with a single plasma blast. It was the pride of the Craxian fleet. The scout ship did something unexpected. It stopped, waited. On the diplomatic station, everyone watched the live feed. Ambassador Krell's skin turned a strange shade of pale blue. His fingers gripped the table. The Craxian battle cruiser fired. A massive plasma bolt shot through space. It was bright. It was powerful. It was the kind of weapon that could slice through entire space stations. But something different happened. The human scout ship simply absorbed the blast. The plasma hit its surface and disappeared, not destroyed, not blocked, absorbed. And then, even more shocking, the ship's energy levels went up. Silence filled the diplomatic station. "Impossible," whispered one of the Craxian diplomats. Yuna Park stepped forward. "Not impossible," she said. "Just unexpected." The balance of power had just changed. One small piece of armor had done what no human technology could do before. It had turned the most powerful weapon in the galaxy into nothing more than an energy source. The Craxian delegates looked at each other. They knew something big had happened. Something that would change everything they understood about warfare, about technology, about humans. And this was just the beginning. The research center looked like a giant metal box from the outside. Inside, it was pure chaos. Machines hummed. Computers blinked. Scientists moved quickly between workstations. Jae-hoon Park stood in the center of it all. His white lab coat was wrinkled. His glasses sat crooked on his nose. But his eyes were bright with excitement. Dr. Seong Min Lee approached him. "We need to test every possible use," she said. Her voice was serious. "This is more than just a space technology." Jae-hoon nodded. They had discovered something amazing. The armor wasn't just good for spaceships. It could change everything. The first test was simple. A small robot carried a piece of the armor. On the other side of the room, scientists prepared a series of powerful energy weapons. Lasers, plasma guns, electric shock generators. "Ready?" asked a technician. Everyone held their breath. The first laser fired. It was bright, powerful. The kind of weapon that could cut through solid metal in seconds. But when it hit the armor, something strange happened. The armor glowed, just for a moment. Then it absorbed the energy completely. Next came the plasma gun. It fired. The bolt looked like a small sun. It should have destroyed everything in its path. But the armor just took the energy in, like a sponge drinking water. The electric shock generator was next. Electricity that could stop a human heart in an instant. But the armor turned it into a tiny power source. "Look at this," Jae-hoon said, pointing to a computer screen. Graphs showed how each type of energy was being converted, transformed, used. They began to imagine the possibilities. Personal armor for soldiers, the kind that could protect against any weapon and power small devices. Buildings that could use energy from attacks as their power source. Vehicles that gained power from being hit. "We need to make more," Dr. Lee said. "And we need to make it cheaper." Teams of engineers started working. They tried different materials, different ways of mixing ceramics and polymers. Each test showed more amazing results. Outside the research center, the world was changing. News had spread about the new technology. People began to understand that something big was happening. A small team started working on civilian uses. What if homes could be built with this material? What if car accidents could actually help power the car? What if being attacked could make you stronger instead of weaker? Jae-hoon watched all of this. He remembered how people had laughed at him before, how experts said his idea was impossible. Now, everything was different. "We're just getting started," he told Dr. Lee. She smiled, a big, proud smile. "The world is going to change," she said. And she was right. The armor that everyone had ignored was about to become the most important technology in human history. One small piece of material was going to change everything. The United Nations building was quiet. Too quiet. Leaders from every country sat around a massive circular table. Their faces showed both excitement and worry. Captain Hai-jin Kim stood at the center of the room. Behind her, a large screen showed images of the new armor technology. Graphs, test results, videos of impossible demonstrations. "This is not just a military technology," she explained. Her voice was calm but strong. "This could change everything about how we protect ourselves." Countries that were once enemies now looked at each other differently. The armor was something new, something that could make traditional weapons useless, something that could protect people in ways nobody had imagined before. In factories around the world, production lines began to change. Engineers worked day and night. They wanted to create the new armor as quickly as possible. In Japan, a team developed armor panels for buildings. In Brazil, scientists worked on protective clothing for dangerous jobs. In Russia, military teams tested the material on tanks and military vehicles. The Global Defense Council met every week. They discussed how to use the new technology, how to make it safe, how to make it available to everyone. "We cannot let this become a weapon of war," said one leader. "This must be a technology of protection." Another screen showed the economic impact. Countries that could produce the armor first would have a huge advantage. But the technology was so important that most leaders wanted to share it, to make it something that could help all of humanity. Schools began to teach about the new material. Children learned how a small piece of armor could change the world, how a simple idea could become something amazing. Space programs became excited. If the armor worked in space, what else could it do? Could humans explore further? Could they protect themselves in ways never thought possible? Jae-hoon Park watched all of this from a small research lab. He looked tired. His clothes were wrinkled, but his eyes were bright. "We're just getting started," he told Dr. Seong-min Lee. She nodded. The technology they had created was changing everything, from how people lived to how countries worked together. The first global production lines began to move. Millions of armor panels were created. They went to hospitals, to military bases, to research centers, to places that needed protection. One factory in South Korea could produce enough panels to cover entire city blocks in just 1 week. Another factory in the United States could create personal armor that could protect workers in the most dangerous jobs. The world was changing, and it was changing fast. Satellite images showed something interesting. Countries that were once enemies were now talking, sharing, working together to understand the new technology. "This is more than just a scientific breakthrough," one UN leader said. "This is a chance for humanity to work together." The armor that started as a small idea in Jae-hoon's mind was now becoming something much bigger. A technology that could protect, that could bring people together, that could change how humans saw themselves and their place in the universe. And this was just the beginning. Space was dark. Stars looked like tiny dots of light near the Orion Nebula. But something big was about to happen. The human fleet looked different now. Ships covered in the new armor panels gleamed like silver giants. They moved with a confidence that was new, powerful, unexpected. The Craxian battle fleet approached. Hundreds of ships, each one built to destroy, each one carrying weapons that had broken entire civilizations before. Captain Hai-Jin Kim stood on the bridge of the lead human ship. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. "All ships," she said, "prepare for engagement." Communication channels crackled. Every ship in the human fleet was ready. But this was more than just another space battle. This was a moment that would change everything. The first Craxian ships fired. Massive plasma bolts shot through space. Each bolt was bright as a small sun. Each bolt carried enough energy to destroy entire space stations. But something different happened. Human ships didn't just survive the attack. They absorbed it. Each plasma bolt that hit became energy for the ships, power that made them stronger, faster. "Targeting systems online," reported David Rodriguez. His fingers moved quickly across control panels. The human ships began to fight back. But this wasn't a normal fight. This was something new, something the Craxians had never seen before. When Craxian ships hit the human vessels, they didn't do damage. Instead, they gave the human ships more power. It was like trying to hurt someone by giving them food. Craxian commanders watched in shock. Their most powerful weapons had become useless. Worse than useless, they were now helping the enemy. One by one, Craxian ships began to retreat. They had never faced an enemy that could turn their attacks into strength. This was impossible. This broke all the rules of space combat. "They're running," Sarah Lee said from the communication station. Her voice was excited, surprised. Captain Kim smiled. A small smile, but a powerful one. The battle lasted less than an hour. Hundreds of Craxian ships against a smaller human fleet. But the humans didn't just win. They dominated. Cameras recorded everything. The entire galaxy would see what happened here. No human ships were destroyed. No human ships were even seriously damaged. Each attack made them stronger. In the research lab back on Earth, Jae-hoon Park watched the live feed. His hands shook. Dr. Seong-min Lee stood next to him. They both knew what this meant. "We did it," Jae-hoon whispered. The technology that everyone had laughed at had just changed space warfare forever. A simple idea, a crazy design, had become the most important defensive technology in human history. The Craxian Confederacy would never be the same. Space warfare would never be the same. Humans had shown the galaxy something important. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon is not about destroying others. It's about turning attacks into strength. The turning point had arrived. The peace conference room was huge. Silver walls reflected soft light. Long tables curved in a circle. Representatives from hundreds of alien species sat together. Jae-hoon Park stood at the center. He looked small, simple, nothing special about him. But everyone watched him. The Craxian high diplomat approached. His silver-blue skin seemed to shimmer. His movements were slow, careful. This was not the same confident alien from months ago. "We want to understand," the diplomat said. His translator made his voice sound smooth. Jae-hoon took a deep breath. He knew this moment was important, not just for him, but for all of humanity. "It's about seeing things differently," he explained. His hands moved as he talked. "Protection isn't about blocking. It's about changing what comes at you." The room listened. Alien representatives from different planets leaned forward. Some had fought humans. Some had ignored humans. Now, they were paying attention. Screens around the room showed images from the recent space battle. Human ships absorbing massive attacks, turning enemy weapons into their own power. It looked like magic, but it was science. "Your technology breaks everything we know," said another alien representative. This one was from a race of energy beings. They understood power differently. Jae-hoon smiled. "That's the point," he said. Dr. Seong-min Lee stood nearby. She had helped develop the technology. She understood what this moment meant. Humanity was no longer just another small species. They were something more. The Craxian diplomat pulled out a data crystal. It was a sign of respect in their culture, something they only did when they truly recognized another civilization's achievement. "We want to learn," he said. Those 3 words changed everything. Humans had not conquered through violence. They had not destroyed their enemies. They had solved a problem in a way no one expected. They had turned attacks into strength. Other alien races began to speak. They asked questions. They wanted to understand how the armor worked, how humans had thought of something so different. It started with a simple question. Jae-hoon explained. What if a shield could do more than just block? Images showed the armor's journey, from a small lab, to space battles, to a technology that could change how protection worked. The conference room felt different now. The alien representatives looked at humans differently, no longer as a weak species, but as something unexpected, something powerful. "We have much to learn from you," said the energy being representative. Jae-hoon thought about all the times people had laughed at his ideas, all the times experts said his work was impossible. Now those same experts were watching him. The data crystal sat on the table, a symbol of respect, of recognition. Humanity had not conquered through weapons. They had conquered through thinking differently, through seeing protection as more than just blocking, through turning challenges into opportunities. The conference continued, but everything had changed, and it all started with a small piece of armor and a young engineer who refused to give up.